I proudly say I did not watch the vice presidential debate because I cannot stress and to give you, I like to get down to the core level of reality. I know many of your independent media people like to dance on the surface and act like that's all they need to talk about. I like to get down to the core level. Core level reality is the presidency doesn't matter nearly as much as we pretend it does, okay? Somewhere between 90 and 90% of all the structural issues of the United States of America and our empire stay exactly the same no matter who's in that goddamn office. So the president doesn't matter as much as you think. The vice president matters zero as much as you think, unless the vice president is the acting president, such as Dick Cheney was acting president while George Bush walked out there and smiled like a big dumb cowboy. But in general, vice president matters almost not at all. On top of that, you have the fact that we don't actually have a democracy, right? Most of you know this. I mean, we have a republic, supposedly, but we don't have that either because the elections are rigged in about 14 different ways, some for Republicans, some for Democrats. But again, the two parties agree on 99% of the structural issues of this country. So what does it matter if one rigs one thing and one rigs another? Most of the gerrymandering is rigged for Republicans. Some of the election machinery is rigged for Democrats. You've got various voter purging, especially black voters that are purged in a lot of states. That's rigged for Republicans. You've got other aspects that are rigged for Democrats. Money rigs both sides. So you have to be a super duper billionaire or have one in your pocket in order to fund any of this shit. So all this shit's rigged. So that's yet another level of how little the vice presidency matters and the vice presidency election matters. And after you get through all of that, how little this matters, you get to this debate that couldn't matter at all. So that's why I didn't watch it. I'm sorry to let you know. But I'm going to play 40 seconds of Walz, Tim Walz, and show you just how much garbage about Israel this guy can spit in just 40 seconds. 40 seconds.
Final voice in the Situation Room. Would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Even in the question, just to debunk the question, it can't be a preemptive strike if they've already struck. They've already struck. They have already killed Iranian generals. They have already killed the top Iranian general, Trump and the Pentagon did, Soleimani. They killed another Iranian commander in the strike that killed top of Hezbollah because he was meeting with an Iranian commander. And so he was killed. And Israel's been assassinating Iranian scientists for years. You can't have like 14 assassinations of Iran and then say, should Israel preemptively strike Iran? They've already struck Iran in like 12 different ways. How can it be preemptive? That aside, let's hear Walz.
Well, thank you. And thank you for those joining at home tonight. Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terror.
Nope, not where it started, okay? It's been going on for years and years. Israel before October 7th, killed thousands of Palestinians a year, often. Israel blows up thousands of buildings. They kill tons of journalists, often. And on top of that, Israel had 5,000 hostages before October 7th. So this whole let's remember when it began, October 7th, is bullshit. And it's designed to get you to think that's when history began, October 7th.
October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners.
Nope. The only people who ever said 1,400 were the initial numbers coming out of the Israeli government on like the day of. The Israeli government has now decreased that number of people killed on October 7th from 1,400 down to, they're now in the 1,100s. I don't know the exact, maybe it's 1,160, which is not a way to say that number. 1,160, something like, I don't know what it is, but it's in the 1,100s. So no one is saying 1,400 anymore, except for Tim Walz. Tim Walz is saying they killed over 1,400 people. No one's saying that anymore. Even just that is bullshit, but also this is not when history began, okay? In order to understand why October 7th happened, you have to understand everything before October 7th. You have to understand what it's like to live in an open-air prison, but we'll skip that for now.
Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely
not defending itself. It's not defending yourself when you're murdering 40,000 people, 70% women and children.
Fundamental. Getting its hostages back. Fundamental.
Is it fundamental for Hamas to get their now 10,000 hostages back? Palestinians? Is that fundamental? Oh, no. Oh, it's only fundamental because they're being tortured. We know they're being tortured. And we actually now have very official reports saying not only does Israel torture these people, but part of the torture, some of the time, is our word. It infuriates me that, if you say it on YouTube, they'll not show your video to people. But Israel's using sexual assault too as a form of torture. And in fact, we saw, I believe it was video. Yeah, we saw video, and I had showed it on this show of the Knesset, the parliament, debating as to whether it was okay to R-word prisoners as torture. And they voted it was. It's fine to sexually assault innocent Palestinians because you feel like torturing them. How morally bankrupt these soulless human beings are is really incredible.
And ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
Oh, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. I wonder how there ended up being a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. How was that? Just the fig trees didn't have a good season? Is that why people are hungry in Gaza? Is it just not rained enough? Is that why people are struggling in Gaza? Or is that they're locked in a prison that's being bombed with enough explosive tonnage to equal 3 Hiroshima bombs? Could that be it? Even though if you look on a map, Gaza is tiny, 25 miles by 5 miles wide, and yet every inch of it has been bombed, equating to over 3 Hiroshima bombs. And I think that might be why there's a humanitarian crisis. But of course, he doesn't say that. He just says resolve, this vague resolve the humanitarian crisis.
But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States.
Now, that is one of the most horrific things he says, and that's why this clip is going viral, is because he says the expansion, the growing beyond where they are right now of Israel and their proxies is absolutely necessary. It is absolutely necessary for a genocidal state and genocidal apartheid state like Israel to steal more land, to grab more hostages, to grab more resources, to expand, to get more weaponry. And people were talking about Tim Walz, again, vice presidents don't matter, but they were talking about him as if he was the more measured one in the Harris-Walz duo. I think she just picked him because, Trump's big thing for the last election, like part of the reason he won, the election he won, was because he kept saying build a wall. And so I think Harris just figured if she had walls, then she'd win. Pretty certain that's why she chose this lunatic. Again, the reason this clip is going viral is because he said the expansion of Israel is absolutely necessary. Totally unhinged. Here is the extremely psychopathic New York Times, and this was one of their articles titled, "We absolutely need to escalate in Iran." Yeah, that's what we need. That's absolutely what we need. And Alan McLeod is absolutely right. He said, delete your subscription to the New York Times. And it is horrific how much the New York Times pushes for war, death, and destruction and manufactures consent for that war, death, and destruction. It's just so horrific. Bloomberg ran a slightly more thoughtful article because apparently some of the U.S. and Israeli ruling sociopaths are considering striking Iran oil facilities as a response. And Bloomberg is saying striking Iran's oil facilities would spark a dilemma for Israel and a shit show for the rest of the world, because hitting the oil facilities, the sector, a mainstream of the country's economy and its international power, certainly offers a wide range of potential targets. However, somewhere between a half and 2/3 of Iran's oil is exported, mainly to China, and China would then turn to other countries to get their oil, such as Russia, thereby giving Russia a lot of money. So it kind of would backfire to the whole hegemony thing that the U.S. is involved in. But on top of that, oil in general would shoot up, the cost of oil in general. You'd probably have many Middle Eastern countries that export oil that are in OPEC no longer wanting to export to the United States or Israel. I mean, I don't know that they export to Israel currently, but this would cause oil prices to shoot up. And what happens in the United States when oil prices shoot up? Oh, Americans, like average working Americans, start to get upset, and they start to do things like vote politicians out and march in the streets and get angry and think that maybe the ruling elite need to meet a guillotine sometime soon. And, in a dark alley where those kind of things go down. So there would be a shit ton of blowback if Israel starts blowing up Iran's oil facilities. But then again, there is no level of idiocy that they won't stoop to, that Israel won't stoop to, that the U.S. government won't stoop to. There really is no level of idiocy that is too much. Anytime you think, well, they wouldn't do that, they wouldn't commit a mass terror act violating all levels of international law, blowing up thousands of pagers and walkie-talkies in people's pockets, killing children, doctors, nurses. They wouldn't do that because that would harm the global economy. It would harm the whole market economy in terms of what people are buying and where they're sourcing it from. Yes, they would. They're that dumb. They're that dumb and that horrific and that sociopathic. Yes, they would. So at every level, it's just like, wow, they cannot be. There's no level of dumb that they won't grab at, that they're like it's candy coming out of a piñata. Oh, give me some more dumb.